I was put into care at the age of 11. I had no idea why. Within weeks, those who were meant to be looking after me began to abuse me. They told me it was normal. All boys did this. Within a year, I was moved to a Catholic boys' home, St. William's in Humberside. From the time I entered that terrible place, I was brutalised and terrorised. Physically, emotionally, and sexually. They raped me repeatedly, usually involving extreme violence, sometimes leaving me so violated that I needed stitches to stop the bleeding. I wasn't the only child they abused. So you want to know what this did to me? It instilled in me a hatred of anyone in authority. It filled me with anger and rage that was difficult for me to understand, let alone for those who witnessed it. I ran away and tried to tell police and social workers, but they just sent me back. I was beaten for telling lies. So I kept silent. No one cared what had happened to me. My life, mental health, day-to-day functioning and place in society continued to spiral downwards into the depths of despair and hopelessness. And the one thing in my life which had an upward path was my anger. Total loss of control leading inevitably to the criminal world. My anger and hatred of authority was put to good use by others, but always for their benefit, never mine. I was a free man in the eyes of the law, but inside my head I was anything but free. The damage was still there, compounded by what I'd suffered in prison. If it wasn't for the Lantern Project support following my release, by now I'd be dead.
I was 15, on the run and penniless. I'd been told about an empty flat over at Bookmakers on Pensby Road. If I got in without damaging anything, I could claim squatters' rights. The door wasn't locked and the key was inside, so in I went. It was a bit rough, but I'd slept in worse places. Beggars can't be choosers. For now, it was home. I was starving. I hadn't eaten since the night before and I'd walked miles. If I was caught stealing, I'd get done for that crime, plus the breach of probation. My only option left was begging. I lay on the bed to think. I fell asleep. By the next morning I was too hungry to be proud. After 2 hours outside the Pensby Hotel and not a penny, I was getting worried. Then a Jaguar pulled into the car park. The driver, wearing a smart suit, smiled at me as he entered the pub. He came out about half an hour later, so I tapped him for money. Looking all around, he smiled and said, "Come home with me. It's worth £20. I told him to fuck off. That night, still penniless and stomach retching with hunger, I fell onto the bed, my mind racing. My father raped me. He let other people rape me for money. The vicars raped me. The gardener raped me. Would it be so bad if I let someone abuse me for money? At least it'd be my decision. Would the man be back there tomorrow? Would I go with him? Hunger again answered my questions. I hadn't been there 5 minutes when his Jaguar pulled into the car park. As I approached, he wound his window down. I said, "Okay." He drove us to a lay-by, reached over, touched my leg. I saw my father's face, screaming. I scrambled out of the car and ran. When I got back to the squat, it had been boarded up. I was back on the street.
These testimonies are real, snapshots of just 2 of the survivors we work with at the Lantern Project. Although different people, they have experienced the same thing. Fear, violence, humiliation, depravity, deviance, and brutality bound together with corrupted sexual activity, leaving their lives blighted by intense psychosexual trauma. The result? Lost childhoods, broken families, wasted futures. The cost to the individuals and society as a whole, incalculable. I know, because the same thing happened to me. When I was just 13, one of the teachers at my school befriended me and then began to sexually abuse me several times a week for almost 2 years. He used me like a sex slave, as if he owned me, and to keep me quiet, he threatened that terrible things would happen to me if I told anyone about it. The abuse finally stopped when I told the headmaster what was happening, and the teacher was moved to another school. Again, it was made very clear that I should forget what had happened to me and not tell anyone. I tried to get on with my life the best that I could, but I just couldn't forget. As I got older, I started drinking and taking drugs, hoping to block out the memories. But they wouldn't go away. As the years went on, I developed psychological problems, eventually suffering a serious mental breakdown, which was later diagnosed as a post-traumatic stress disorder. I was told that I also had a chronic underlying depressive illness, something I had probably suffered from for years, all because of the abuse I had experienced in my childhood. I was given counselling and antidepressants, but neither were very effective. No one seemed to really understand what I'd been through, or the full extent of the damage sexual abuse causes long after the abuse itself has stopped.
It takes time and a detailed understanding of how child abuse affects the development of children into adults, something we have learned over the past 12 years since the formation of the Lantern Project. This experience has enabled us to develop a recovery framework which we call Unstructured Therapeutic Disclosure. It is based on our own personal experiences of abuse and therapy, together with the work we have done with some 1,500 victims of all ages, male and female, and from all backgrounds. The aim is to enable victims to move forward to a point that we call, and they can recognise as, a sustainable recovery. In 2008, we concluded that a more holistic approach was needed for the treatment of victims of psychosexual trauma than was currently available. The conventional approach involves the victims, at the outset, having to tell the police, GP, or a counsellor exactly what has happened to them, when it happened, who was involved, and how long it lasted. This very detail-specific event is referred to as disclosure, which inevitably re-traumatises the victim. Detail-specific disclosure is not the place to begin the process. Our approach is to view disclosure as being a much wider event, encompassing not just the detail of the trauma itself, but everything that has resulted from it, of how the abuse will have impacted on the victim's development into adulthood. Before any therapeutic work can begin, it is essential to understand exactly where the individual is in terms of their general health, mental health, and social functioning. This process will provide enough information to create an initial care plan and enables us to recognize the type of trauma the individual has experienced without them having to disclose the detail of their abuse. Having completed the impact assessment, we explain in appropriately graphic detail exactly what happened to us. This reassures the victim that we already know what happened to them because we have been through the same trauma. This provides a bridge of trust over which they can walk, removing at a stroke any fears they may have of what they are expected to tell us and how we may react. A pivotal element in this therapeutic process is to give the victim a comprehensive explanation of what will have happened to them over the course of their life since the abuse. To help with this, we show them how other victims have experienced the same problems. This tells them that they are not alone and that their inevitable inner conflict, usually caused by feelings of guilt, shame, disgust, fear, and the idea that they are somehow different from everyone else, are not specific to them. Victims need their abuse to be acknowledged and understood by others. This is a complex area, so we help the victim to identify who really needs to know and who does not. Then how they should be told, how they are likely to react, with countermeasures ready for negative reaction, and what changes are likely to occur as a result. Victims also need some form of reconciliation, which is usually in the form of compensation for the abuse or punishment of the perpetrators. This is another highly complex area, so we identify with the victims the most suitable route, how to go about it, and the support they will need during the process. We work with other agencies, the victim's GP for example, to develop the clinical interventions necessary in addition to counselling that the victim will need in order to achieve what we define as a sustainable recovery. We do not use the term closure, as we do not accept the concept as it is normally used. We see the healing process as ongoing. This allows for good days and the inevitable bad days. The order in which these 6 elements are delivered is not significant in terms of the final outcome, hence the term unstructured. We have found that victims will respond in very different ways, and it is important that they be allowed to explore issues as they occur. There is usually a natural order to the way the total disclosure is achieved, most of which tends to evolve once we have completed the personal impact understanding element. On average, the time spent with each victim is about 7 months, during which we will have worked with them on a weekly basis to begin with, tailing off after about 3 months to once every 2 weeks and then once a month. Thereafter, we provide an as-required service, which enables survivors, as they have now become, to discuss any issues that crop up and to stay in touch with the project and with other survivors.